All right, so today we have the amazing and fabulous drag superstar Ginger Minj with us. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So, Ginger,
Yeah,
at the time of this interview, you are currently in Chicago performing the Broadway with your longtime collaborator, Gidget Galore. So tell us,
I am.
tell us how's that been going and what is the show about?
Well, those are both very loaded questions. It's been going great. So I'm sitting in the warmth of this Airbnb, looking out the window at the banks of snow and all that. Like, I'm from Florida, so that's still exotic to me, but I like to watch it from this side of the window.
Yeah.
So it's been very interesting having to like sing in this cold, cold weather. It's been like wreaking havoc on my voice, but we're having so much fun doing that for like that hour long show that I don't even think about it until it's over.
Yeah.
The show is an hour, and in that hour, it is chaos. It's 24 Broadway hits that everybody knows and loves,
Okay.
20 costume changes, and there's something for everybody. You know, they always say, make them laugh every 30 seconds. Well, we're doing it every 10.
For 10
It
seconds.
is unhinged. It is ridiculous. And if you love Broadway and show tunes,
Mhm.
you're going to love this. If you don't like Broadway and show tunes, we found a way to make you love this.
Awesome. Very nice. And so you're in Chicago until February 4th, and then you'll be taking the show to New York, LA, and Palm Springs. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we're in negotiations to add a couple more stops after that in March. So make sure like you're just following my social media because we always keep the most up-to-date posts there.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So when did the show initially debut?
So this past summer in P Town was my third year there. It was
Mhm.
my second with Gidget. She's been my best friend for 21 years. We started drag together.
Oh,
And
nice.
after my first summer in P Town, I was like, you've got to come here. Your mind is going to be blown. Your life is going to be changed. You have to come do this. So we went and we did a big Disney cabaret, which was really fun.
Mhm.
And then last year going in, we said, we love Broadway. We started drag through theater,
Yeah.
both of us. And when we started all those years ago, decades ago at this point, in Orlando, there was no space for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody knew us, they liked us, but they were like, I don't really know where the Broadway thing fits in. We
Mhm.
all lip sync, you're live singing. So we created our own spaces, we created our own shows. And a lot of those shows are still running to this day, even without us.
Okay. Okay.
So we said, let's get back to our roots. Let's create something like that again. Something
Mhm.
that's just fun, lots of costumes, lots of glitz, and just celebrates Broadway.
Awesome. Very.
So we sat down. We did not know what the Broadway was going to be, and we just started going back and forth like we do,
Mhm.
saying the stupidest things to each other. And there are times where we'll put something in a script
Mhm.
and go, "This is never going to work," and it ends up getting the biggest laugh. So
Yeah.
we end up going with that, and then adding more of that kind of stuff. So we debuted it in P Town this past summer,
Yeah.
sold out every night, standing ovations every night. All the reviews were like, "This is the best show to hit P Town in decades," and it was news to us because we were just two idiots going out there and having a good time.
And that's the best way to
So
do it.
it is, and now it's lovely to be able to travel around and take that everywhere else. And I'm so excited. First of all, Chicago, I always call my home away from home, but I
Mhm.
spend more time here than I do in Orlando now. So this is really like coming home. But I'm really excited to take this show to New York
Yeah.
with a whole community of people who eat, sleep, live, and breathe Broadway every day.
Definitely, definitely. So, out of all the productions that you explore in the show, which one is your absolute favorite?
Gypsy is
Just-
probably my favorite.
Okay.
Yeah. I accidentally played Mama Rose when I was 18 years old,
Accidentally?
before I ever even started drag. Yeah, well, I was costuming a production of Gypsy at our local community theater. And
Okay.
then the night before opening, and, I was there every rehearsal. I
Mhm.
loved the show anyway. I loved the Bette Midler movie, which
Yeah.
wasn't that old at that point. And our Mama Rose got into like a knockdown, drag out fist fight
Oh, dang.
with the director and quit.
Oh,
So they're
wow.
like, what do we do? We open in less than 24 hours. And I was like, well, I fit the costumes and I know the show. And they laugh and then they look at me and they go, well, maybe. I had never done drag a day in my life at this point. And they said, just put on the costume and sing a couple of songs. So I did. And they're like, okay, it'll work. It wasn't like, oh, a star is born. No, it was more like, okay, maybe this will help us out of this jam. So
Yeah.
I ended up playing Mama Rose for a week and a half until they brought the new actress in from New York to
Okay.
take over. But I loved doing that. And I would love at this point in my career to be able to actually purposefully do it.
Mhm.
But Rose's Turn to me is the pinnacle of musical theater.
Yeah, definitely.
It's that moment where everything is led up to it and it encompasses every emotion possible. It runs the
Mhm.
full gamut. So
Yep.
I knew I wanted to put that into the show for myself, but I also didn't think about it logistically when I said, all right, I'm singing Rose's Turn, and then not even 20 seconds later, we're doing the Hot Honey Rag from Chicago.
Okay. Okay.
So I looked at Gidget on opening night right after we finished Hot Honey Rag, and I was like, who the hell wrote this show? She's like, you did, Mary. Now suck
You
it up
did.
and get back out there. It's a marathon, but it's so worth it.
Definitely, for sure. So is performing on Broadway a big goal of yours?
Yeah, I mean that's why I got into drag in the first place. I got into drag through theater.
Hmm.
It does, of course, this years after the Mama Rose
Yeah.
incident,
Yeah.
but I've always loved being in front of a live audience. I've learned to really appreciate the nuance of film and television. I enjoy doing that as an actor, but as an entertainer,
Mhm.
there's nothing like having that interaction with an audience, that where you feel their energy just come into you and then you just give it right back to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just such a beautiful relationship. And it's something I will never give up. And I would love to do that
Hmm.
on the Broadway level.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks to Jinx Monsoon's successful performance in Chicago, I really hope that will open a door for more drag stars to be on Broadway.
Me too. I mean, for even before Jinx, we had Peppermint,
Yeah,
which
Peppermint.
was just so incredible to go and sit there and watch my friend, my
Mhm.
sister, somebody from the same part of life as me, just succeed so beautifully on a Broadway stage. And
Yeah.
then I got to go experience it again with Jinx. And Jinx and I actually, we got very close when we were supposed to do a national tour of Xanadu a
Okay.
couple years ago, right before the pandemic,
Gotcha.
and it ran into financial problems right as we were supposed to open, so it was postponed.
Mhm.
And then as soon as we were supposed to pick up and go out on the road, the pandemic struck and everything was shut down, so we never got to actually do it. But just sharing that creative space with Jinx for 3 months that we put that show together,
Mhm.
I learned so much as a performer, and she's told me she learned so much from me as well. It was just such an incredible working relationship. What a productive environment. And
Yeah.
I think that that's the most beautiful thing about theater, is you just get to create
Mhm.
something out of nothing, which
Yeah.
is exactly what drag is.
Exactly. Definitely. I agree. Now, kind of switching gear just a little bit, you said that you are originally from Florida. You're still based in Florida. Is that correct?
I am. So I'm actually from Leesburg, which is about an hour north of Orlando.
Okay.
And we always say in Florida, the further north you go, the further south you actually are. So it's like a totally different world
Hmm.
from Orlando. But I've been in Orlando for the last almost 19 years now.
Okay.
And it's as crazy as Florida is,
Mhm.
it is like a beautiful little blue island oasis in the midst of a big red sea.
Yeah.
So it's very gay and very happy and very Disney and all that. So it does feel like home,
Mhm.
but I'm very careful not to step too far outside of those county lines.
Yeah, because that's my next question. Because Florida has been one of the leaders in the anti-drag movement. So, do you have
Mhm.
any thoughts or opinions you would like to share about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before, but I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, we have to look at it as this is ridiculous.
Hmm.
We've been around for forever. We are always the ones at the forefront of big movements, particularly within the LGBTQIA plus community. We are community leaders and builders. We're people who aren't afraid to, roll up our sleeves and get dirty and get out there and make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to dealing with children, that's the thing that hurts the most, I think, is because I've always felt so protective over children because I was abused so much in so many different ways, which you can read about all in my book, Southern Fried Sass.
Yeah, a little bit.
But I was abused in so many different ways that my life goal has been to protect those kids out there that are so much like me when I was growing up, so they don't have to go through that, so they don't have to feel the way that I did. So there's that side of it. But then there's also the side that goes, well, we finally made it mainstream enough that we are being noticed as powerful people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the silver lining of that dark cloud. That's the good thing that we need to cling on to, is that there is power in visibility, and we're finally visible enough that they're afraid of the power that we have.
Exactly. I agree.
And as long as we use it for good, we're all set,
Exactly. Well, what advice can you offer to a newbie who would like to try drag but is too afraid to do so because of this current environment?
Well, the first thing is just to do what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Like, one of my favorite things in the world is AFAB drag. And people are like, these girls can't be drag queens. Well, why not? To me, drag is a celebration of femininity. At least female presenting drag is, if you're a drag king, it's that hyper masculinity. It's not making fun of it. It's really celebrating it and pumping it up. And in Orlando, we have Venus Envy, who's probably the best AFAB queen I've ever met, but maybe in the world. Very well known. And there's something about this beautiful young woman who piles on more makeup and hair in drag than I've ever worn at any given time, and becomes this even more incredible creature.
Yeah.
That is just this explosion of feminine power. So I really enjoy that. And I say that just to be like, people are going to tell you you're either right or you're wrong. And it's up to you to decide what makes you feel best and just go with that.
Yeah.
And just from a logistical standpoint, just like when you're building a house, you have to start with a sturdy foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you buy at the drugstore is not going to cover and blend and smooth and make you look good. Just invest your money in a good theatrical, thick cream foundation, and then everything you put on top of it can be cheap, and you can learn how to work that.
Yes, exactly. I agree. Well, now circling back to your book, which was released in November, Southern Fried Sass. How has it been received?
As better than I even hoped. I wrote the book because, when you're blessed to be on something like RuPaul's Drag Race, people feel like they get to know you.
Yeah.
And I think that they do, but it's on a very surface level because you're dealing with, an hour to an hour and a half a week for a certain amount of time, and you're sharing screen time with all these other people. So you get like little breadcrumbs of who we are or what our stories may be. And it was so strange for me to be out on the road and to have people either come up to me or post online things about my life that they were projecting that had never happened or couldn't be further from the truth. But they were like, in order to get from this point to this point, this is probably what had to have happened. And I said, no, this is what actually happened. And I started telling bits and pieces of my actual story. And lo and behold, there was such a power in that communication. People started to go, oh my God, my mind is blown. I've been through the same thing. That could be my story. I didn't do that, but I went through this. And that's kind of like that led me to this point. So I decided I wanted to put pen to paper and tell my life story, fill in those gaps for everybody else.
Yeah.
And then when Simon and Schuster came around after All Star 6, they came to my show in P-Town.
Okay.
My editor, Michelle, and she was like, I need to talk to you after the show. So, okay. She comes into the dressing room and she goes, I think you were robbed, and I will give you $100,000 right now if you sign this contract and write a book for me. And I said, okay.
Oh,
So I said, if there's anything I could do, it is write about myself. I sat down and I type out the title, and then I sit there for hours and hours and hours trying to figure out where to begin.
yeah.
How, like, what's the thread of this thing? What's the jumping off point? Because I don't want to tell a story in a way that is selfish. I don't want to tell it just from my perspective. I want to tell a story that brings everybody in. So I struggled with it for a while, and then my grandmother passed away. And when she did, she didn't have a whole lot of material possessions, but she had a recipe box.
Okay.
And it was prized. Everybody wanted it, but she left it to me because I did most of the cooking and the baking with her for decades. So I decided to share it with my mom, my sister, and my aunt Glenda Faye. And as we were going through the recipes, we were laughing and we were crying and we were talking about these memories and these stories. And I was learning stuff about recipes I had never seen before, stories I had never heard from 50, 60, 70 years prior. And I realized suddenly, oh, food does that. Food is my love language.
Yeah.
And I've learned in all of my travels, like if you can't communicate with somebody verbally, you can communicate with them through food. You can learn about them and understand them more about the food they share with you. So I thought that's a great jumping off point. It's very accessible. And once I started piecing my life together in recipes, it was so easy to weave the rest of the story into it.
It just flowed.
And people have lost their minds over this because they're commiserating or laughing along with me to the things that have happened in my life, while also tagging me in pictures of their meatloaf that they've made from my cookbook, or the blueberry bars, or all these things. And even more than hearing how they share the story, it's more exciting for me to see them make this food and enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's been really wild. Like, wild's the only word that comes to mind because it's just so overwhelming and all consuming.
Yeah. And this was also a very cathartic process for you, wasn't it?
Oh my goodness, yes. There's stuff in this book that I never even told my therapist.
Yeah.
So when I started writing this thing, I mean, the original draft was like War and Peace or Les Mis. It was huge. And my editor was like, you cannot go from this dark subject to muffins. You can't do that. Like, you've got to find a way to make a lot more sense. So I started taking out pieces of the life to leave just like the bits that propel the story forward.
Yeah.
So there's enough in there for a sequel if there needs to be one. But I wanted to kind of give an overarching story, you know, instead of just get bogged down in the details. And when I got to do that, that was the cathartic part, because things that had affected me so deeply now made no sense or had any bearing on my story.
Yeah.
So I got to snip out these really dark parts of my past and throw them away. And it felt like I was throwing them away for good and not having to deal with them anymore.
Yeah, definitely. And I also love that you shared your love of hosting throughout the book. And you talk about that, about dinner parties, and which kind of segues into my next question. You partnered up with Nina West for Hulu's Drag Me to Dinner. So how much fun was that?
That was wacky. It was so nobody knew what Drag Me to Dinner was supposed to be at all. And originally I was supposed to be paired up with Gidget.
Oh, okay.
But Nina, it was the format was supposed to be slightly different, I believe.
Okay.
And I think there was supposed to be 3 teams. So then all of a sudden, Nina was without a partner when they reformatted. And Nina called me and she's like, "Sister, we never get to work together. Can we do?" So I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." Gidget was so busy. She was on So Fierce for Out TV at the time.
Okay.
So she was like, "I actually would prefer to step back for a second." So we got there and nobody really knew what was happening, except for the fact that our theme was Tupperware, and we had to throw a party that encompassed Tupperware, hosting, and food.
Yeah.
in my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is like a real competition. I mean,
Mhm.
it was a real competition, but in the sense of like, we have to take this very seriously.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then all of a sudden, we step on stage and we see all of the shenanigans and
yeah,
everything that's going on. And you just have to embrace it,
yeah.
or you're going to get so overwhelmed. So Nina and I ended up having the best day ever. It
Mhm.
was the same day that we did the Hocus Pocus 2 premiere
Oh, okay.
in New
Now,
York. So I went from the studio. We started filming at 5 a.m. I
mhm.
left from there and immediately like stepped out of the car onto the red carpet
Nice.
that night. So
Mhm.
it was this long day,
Okay.
but we just had the best time
Mhm.
just being idiots. And to me, that's the fun of food
Oh,
too,
yeah,
is when
yeah,
you can just throw things together and have a good time while you're doing it.
yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't turn out. Sometimes you discover a brand new recipe that you use forever for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
We did not learn any recipes that day that we'll be using forever because nobody wants to eat that gelatin with the hot dogs in it ever again. But we just had such a good time doing it. And I think that's why we won. I think that's
Yeah.
why people have been drawn to our episode more than a lot of the other ones because there
Mhm.
was just this pure joy
Yeah.
of being there in the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I remember watching the episodes, and when I was involved with the press junket with Neil and David and Bianca, and I told them,
Mm-hmm.
like, this was just absolute chaos, and we were just like living for it, and that's exactly what it was. And I mean, having Neil and David there for one thing, but then having Bianca Del Rio as your judge, that is like a whole different story than Murray and Hanifa. It
Well,
just,
I was so sad that we didn't get Hanifa because she was sick.
oh,
And Hanifa, I knew her longer than I've known of anybody except for Neil Patrick Harris
okay.
because she was one of the urchins in the pre-Broadway Little Shop of Horrors in Miami,
Oh,
which I
okay.
was obsessed with, and I used to drive down every weekend when they had their run there. So I saw her and met her so many times doing that show
Mhm.
that I was like, I haven't seen her in years. I just want to see her and give her. And she wasn't there.
Of course, of course. Well, hopefully we'll connect later.
Yeah, I got to see her since. It was really nice to catch up with her.
Good, good. Well, Ginger, what's next in your journey? What are some future goals you hope to accomplish with your career and platform?
Oh goodness,
Not a loaded question.
it's another loaded question. There's just so much. I'm one of those queens who I like to have my hand in every pot.
Hmm.
I don't I get bored easily. And that sounds so bad to say. I'm very happy with what I do, but I always like to keep things fresh. I like to look at what project is next, what else I can sink my teeth into, what I can roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty. So there's a couple TV things coming up, a couple movie things. I did a short film called Stand Behavior,
Okay.
which is it's like a comedic drag queen version of Misery,
Okay.
and it stars myself and Madeline Zima,
Okay.
who has just been on soap operas and movies and all these things.
Yeah.
Madeline Zima, her sister, was Gracie in The Nanny. She was the
Hmm.
youngest kid, which we bonded over our love of Fran Drescher while we
Love the
were there.
nanny. Love the nanny.
But she's spectacular. The movie's so good. It's so fun. And it's making the circuit this year through all the film festivals, getting a lot of good buzz already. And just a lot of live stage shows. I'm
Okay.
coming to a town near you. So the
Yes.
best thing to do is always just, first of all, buy the book so you can learn so much about me, more than you ever wanted to know.
Yep.
And then follow me on social media.
Okay. Okay. So we have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
TikTok.
TikTok. Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
not great at TikTok, but my husband follows me around and films me doing stupid stuff, and all of a sudden there's a million views.
There you
So
go. That's how
I
it
guess that's
works.
how to do it.
Yes. All right. Perfect. So we have all social media handles. All right. Then before we wrap up, are there any other upcoming projects or anything else you'd like to mention or plug at this time?
Um, Other than what we've talked about, no, I'm just really super focused on the book right now. My last album, Double Wide Diva,
Mm.
was my country album. It did really well, so we're actually working on a new country album
Okay.
coming up later this year. So there's a lot in the works that
That
I can't
works.
really talk about yet, but just stay tuned. There's so much fun stuff going on.
All right. Perfect.